I'm Neil Dubord, Chief of the Delta Police Department. This week on our show,
you need to grasp how important you are, how valuable you are, and the investment in keeping yourself well, even if that means your workplace has to be without you for a little bit of time at various points in your marathon of a career. Do it because you are valuable and you are worth it.
Bend, don't break. This is a Delta Police podcast.
Hear more about how police officers strengthen their resiliency through the power of story.
I want to start off by saying thank you so much for being able to sort of join us, and we really value your time and recognize that your experience and your story is something we can all learn from. And you look wonderful. I don't know what retirement is doing for you, but you look wonderful. So for anyone listening to this, they can look at, hear me saying, Chief Bob Rich, you look amazing. So
I look great on a podcast, I'm quite sure, all right?
Yeah. I always say I've got a face for radio, but you've got a face for television. I've seen you on Global, and you're the real deal.
Well, I don't have a voice for radio. So there you go. It's been good. It's been good to be able to go to the gym every morning and to get 8 hours of sleep. That's a bit of a change, right? So,
well, I even noticed you look very svelte. So obviously you've been doing something around eating right and working out.
Well, when you've got an example like Neil Dubord to look to, it's pretty much mandatory that you try to live up to the high standards. You don't want to be a slob like that Norm Lipinski guy.
Absolutely
right?
not.
Exactly.
There's some laughter here going on in the studio, so that's what's good about it.
You bet.
I think what I want to start off with is that Bend Don't Break is about how we enable our members to be able to have some tools to deal with challenges that they'll face in their life, whether that be through their policing career or even their family challenges that they see or other challenges that come emotionally or physically, within their lives. And I think that your experience over the last 5 years has been actually absolutely phenomenal, and some of the things you've learned. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about it. So why don't I let you start sort of where it all begins?
Yeah, I was just thinking as you said that on the back of our John Davidson cycling jerseys is Latin for Bend Don't Break, and so we have sort of adopted that as one of the ways of understanding resilience, is to know that you need to stop and breathe and figure yourself out and then get back up and keep going, right? And so there you go.
Can you pronounce what the Latin word is?
Not a clue.
Okay. No. I'm going to look that up as soon as I'm done here.
We can
That's
do that.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, we had an artist, one of our members' wives is a graphic artist, and did this amazing drawing of a tree that's bending.
Right.
And then
The
leaves
classic
are actually
willow
the brains.
versus the oak, right?
Yes.
That's the thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. So it was wonderful.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about when it started.
Yeah. I always use 2015 as our seminal year, as the year where it all came together. In a classic novel, if you think about it, there's this parabolic U that all the characters go through, this great dip. And if we were writing a novel about the APD, 2015 is the bottom of the U. And it actually started earlier when we had Vancouver Police do an investigation on one of our members, and he ended up being charged, and it was a very tumultuous time for us to have done an internal investigation like that. But one of the truly horrible things that happened, and I consider it one of the greatest errors of my career, was that, and not intentional, but the impact was devastating. 2 members were caught up in that investigation and ended up being investigated criminally, as well as this member who we knew we had a problem with. And I absolutely believe both those members, believe to this moment, that both those members were completely innocent, but they were investigated criminally by Vancouver. And when I found out that was going to happen to them, and that they'd been caught up, and I hadn't protected them during this investigation, that was my leadership crisis. And it happened before 2015, but it was the period of time where I faced what many members face when they feel like there's an existential threat to them, that they could be done by something that's happened. And I felt like I was about to lose my members' faith. I felt like I had breached, I call it the social contract. We hire a member and we hand them a badge, and I say, look, I'm going to ask you to go out in the street and risk a lot. And potentially make a mistake that causes a problem or gets you under investigation or all of those things, because that's just part of the chaos. But I'm going to have your back as long as you're out there trying to do what you're supposed to do. If you don't lie, cheat, or steal, if you tell me the truth about what happened, if you're out there doing your best, my job's to have your back. Well, I felt like I breached that contract with those two members, that I didn't have their back. I let them get entangled in something that I should have protected them from. And so that was the first thing for me that had happened where I was truly limping as a leader, where I was trying to lead, but I myself was truly broken a little bit. In 2015, in February of 2015, the police complaint commissioner decided that he would announce to the world, without warning, that 17 members in the APD were under investigation. So there'd been an audit after this in criminal investigation, and police complaint commissioner decided that a bunch of members were going to be investigated in relation to things they did around search warrants. I think probably some of our members did make some mistakes. The police complaint commissioner seemed to believe that many of them had committed deceits. I do not have that view. And nevertheless, he decided at some point in February that he was going to go public with that. And so I remember I was in Richmond at a Chiefs meeting, and I drove back. I drove back to Abbotsford. I had to borrow a uniform because I had put my stuff in the cleaners or whatever, and I had 15 minutes of prep time, and I went out and did a media scrum because I wasn't going to leave that story out there before the new news cycle. I made some mistakes, factual mistakes in that news scrum, but I hit the ball as hard as I could. To defend our members, defend our organization, because I believe the way the story was coming out was absolutely not an accurate reflection of what was going on. That we were going through a hard time, but I think I had one police officer who had truly been corrupt, and I had a bunch of cops who, a few may have made a mistake, but were really great cops who needed to be defended. One of the people under investigation was me. They decided I shouldn't have told the union at a certain point that those two members needed counsel, and I told the union that in confidence, and they looked after that confidence, and so I was completely confident I'd done the right thing. But nevertheless, when I'm standing in front of the camera, I am talking about 17 members, but I'm also aware that I'm one of them, and it's a very vulnerable feeling. And I can remember walking back into my office and shutting the door and crying. And I was trying to figure myself out, like, why did I start crying? But I felt utterly betrayed. And I felt like the rug had just been yanked. And I really wondered where I was as a leader. And, one of the things I've learned, I think, is that a leader who goes through trauma like that and manages to get back up and rise and go through it, might be in a better place to help people who are doing the same thing. Anyway, that was the start of 2015, and the two horrible events that follow are much more serious and devastated lives of families. But in May, we were about to have a retirement event for 6 amazing police officers. It was an incredible night, beautiful night. It was an outdoor garden we were going to have this dinner in, and I was just put on my dress uniform to head out to this thing. We got word that a police officer was in serious medical condition, was maybe going to pass away in Langley, and then we started to understand that it would look self-inflicted, and didn't know if he was going to make it or not. And I drove my view the wrong way. I had to drive almost out to Chilliwack to tell everybody that we couldn't celebrate. And the entire time I'm driving there, I think I'm going the wrong way. I need to be at the hospital in Langley. And it's a horrible feeling. And I get out of the car and everybody's celebrating and they're slapping me on the back and they're being very friendly. And I need to announce this thing. And it's just like a rock that I'm carrying as I go into this. And I remember driving back to Langley and meeting his family and saying goodbye to him in the hospital room, and just feeling so broken over what had gone wrong here. And I don't know what difference it makes, but the part of me was so afraid that it would be one of the 17 members, that it would be part of something that I had put into motion that had caused this. And it didn't turn out that was the case. And out of that story, I would say my lesson for all of us is pay attention to concussions. This was a person who played sports. He had multiple concussions. They didn't happen in the workplace, which makes it harder. But we have a concussion protocol, and I never let somebody come back to work after a concussion with a GP signing them off. with greatest respect to the medical profession, people need to see specialists after a concussion. And if it's multiple concussions, we need to be paranoid about looking after that person in order to ensure their mental well-being. In June, I was in Langley again. I was actually in Langley after a breakfast, and we got word that a member was texting a friend and was saying things about taking their life, and we started to try to find this member, and we were doing pinging and all the things we do to find somebody in trouble that way. And the RCMP in Langley found the member in a park in Langley, and she was dead, and she'd shot herself. And I went to that scene too, and went and saw her, and went and sat on a piece of concrete, one of those concrete lane divider thingies or whatever, barriers. And I can feel the concrete under my butt as I talk, the cold concrete, because I couldn't get up. I was trying to figure out how to get up and go back and tell 300 people that we'd lost her a month after losing that first member. And I'm like, I don't know if I've got what this takes. And I got up and I phoned my wife as I'm now driving back, and I left 3 inspectors there trying to work with Langley and their own grief, their own story. Everybody's got their own pain as they go through something like this. My wife gets this phone call with this sobbing person on the other end who's just trying to tell her what I'm dealing with, and she just sort of absorbs as much pain as she can. And I hang up, and I don't know where I am now because I'm driving towards Abbotsford, but I'm on country roads, and I really have to find a spot on a GPI. Like I've just been driving blind, I guess, is what I've been doing. Anyway, I make my way back, and we tell, again, 300 people that we've lost a second member. And it changed me because my mission had been to make the community safe, and I focused, I believe in being a sharp arrow. I believe in not getting distracted to the left and to the right with all the things that go on. My job is to make the community safe. But it changed me, and I looked at our organization and realized we had 11 members off with PTSD. That's 5% of our strength. And I'm like, I'm blind. I am missing something. I have missed a boat here. And so that first mission has to stay. We are hired for one reason. You as the chief of one job here in Delta really is to keep this community safe. But I've added a second M to, and so the first mission, but the second M is my members. And I spend in the last few years as much energy trying to figure out how to keep members well as I ever did trying to keep the community safe. And so I became bilateral focus, so whatever you want to call that. I have gone through a transformation where, and maybe it's part of my own healing as I walk through this, but I have put as much energy as I can into figuring out how to have 300 people in Abbotsford become police officers or other key positions in our organization, go through a career, and walk out the door at the end and be actually healthy and well.
Now, tell me a little bit. Your son is also a police officer.
You bet.
So tell me about how that impacts you a little bit during all of this.
He's simply an amazing person. Both my sons are, I think. And I think he's a very connected person. It's a negotiator. That's a sort of a natural place for somebody with those skills to go. He is a good reflection for me of the next generation, to stay connected. One of our problems, obviously, is that we end up with sort of different ways of looking at things than younger people. These are, trying to lead police officers who were born well after I became a police officer. So it's really cool for me to have kids that have kept me. They are just so socially aware, and so discussions in our family are deep and rich, and we talk about a lot of these things. They both worked in the downtown east side. They worked at the supervised injection site. They worked with mentally ill people. So it's pretty cool. The night John Davidson died, Tim said, "I don't care what time you get home. Just tell me. I'll be at your house." And that's something, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I want to go into a little bit. So now you have these 17 members under investigation, including yourself. We all know, and certainly we've heard from other police officers that we've had on Bend Don't Break, the amount of stress that is inherent within those complaints. And sometimes it trumps everything else in our lives. It becomes the only thing we can focus on. So, I mean, that alone takes focus. And then you have your 2 suicides in a short period of time, which produces a whole bunch more trauma for your organization and certainly for you as a leader as well. I think that I'd be really interested to understand, you're legally trained. I would think, you've 40 years in policing. You are very deliberate and very thoughtful in your actions. But what does it take for you to connect now with that emotional side? Because you're quickly becoming someone who's very in line with your 2 M's, as you called it, your 2 missions.
Yeah. And there's been a progression for me around that. My wife comments on it, right? Yes. And the person who watches and knows you. The trick for me has been what is the right amount of vulnerability for my members to see. Because I believe they need to know how much this all hurts me. But they also need to have a leader who they can have faith is not crumbling at the helm. And the two are in tension to some degree, or they can be. And I'm sure different members would have different views on whether I've been too sort of open with them or not. I'm a bit of a fan of Brene Brown. You can watch her TED Talks on vulnerability and shame. My belief is that a courageous leader has figured out how to be vulnerable with his or her people in order for a true connection to occur between them, in order to for them to understand that it's okay to take a knee, to bend and not break. In order, they have to see that in the leader too. They have to see that the leader gets hit by something and has to pause and take a knee and express what it really felt like, and then find tools for resilience and stand up and keep going, right?
Well, you go by the old Fathom, in my personal opinion, from what I know of you, is that, you never move people by what you say, but you move people by how you make them feel.
Yeah.
And you make the people that work for you feel a certain way, and that's why they want to follow you. I mean, and then that's by showing the right level of vulnerability. But I want to go back to sort of, you've had these 3 issues now just before John Davidson's death, and I want to lead us up to that.
Yeah.
But what have you done in the organization to be able to have the organization deal with that? What are some of the things you've done?
Yeah. So I'm going to get a little instructive for 2 seconds, because I boil it down to 4 things that have to change in an organization in order to do exactly what you're talking about. Because there's 2 things going on here. One is the organization and the outside influences, like a complaint process system, and the other is the individual. And really, the 2 things you can work on come down to those 2 things. But there's 4 things that I talk about. The first is that the people like you and me have to lead in a new way. And so that vulnerability I'm talking about is a part of leading in an absolutely new way. We have to be intentional about what we're trying to do. We have to have a mission about looking after our members, and we have to be willing to connect. One of the tricks for getting somebody through a police act matter is not to leave it to somebody else to hold that person up. One of the people that a member going through hell needs to hear from is their chief. It's not the only support they need, but there is no replacement for the boss phoning somebody and saying, we are behind you, whatever you need. And just that voice saying, you're going to get through this, and I'm on your side. Like in the end, you might get whacked a couple of days or something for what you did because it didn't quite go well that night or whatever, or not. It all depends on the circumstances. But you did what I asked you to do. You went out there in the middle of that chaos, and I'm going to do everything I can to carry you through this. So, with the 17, I'm not saying there's no perfect execution of this here, but we met with them. I talked about what I was going through. I left the room and left them with a lawyer who they could quiz. We had a psychologist come in and meet with them. We tried to figure out how to hold them up, and even the fact they were together, because eventually they had to get permission to be in the same room, because you aren't supposed to talk about who's under investigation, all those things. But they all knew who they were, and so we ended up sort of looking for ways to hold them up. That included me and included other kind of supports that we could think of. The second thing that has to change is that our workplaces have to be safe places. So, it's been great that, respectful workplace and all the things that we've been learning about that. Those seem like really good things to ensure that somebody's not being harassed in the workplace and all that. But actually, it's utterly fundamental to the mental well-being of an organization that your organization be a safe place. So we send police officers out into the field, and people treat them like, I don't know how much expletives you do in this. People treat them not very nicely. Anyway, but when and that's expected, and there's nothing we're going to do about what a drunk says to one of your black members or to a gay member, or like it's offensive and horrible, but that's going to happen to them. But when they walk back into that building and the door slams behind their butt, it better be safe. And when they've just gone to a horrible call, the other members better have learned how to rally around that member as opposed to tease them or bug them. They come back from a SIDS death. This organization better be a place that holds them up. And so that the safe place is something for us to all be working on. And, I was horrified. We did a survey on our department and asked our members questions about harassment and those things. And in this modern age, the number of people that felt like in the last 2 years somebody has said or done something that they felt harassed or threatened by horrified me. And so we have really tried to face into that head on. But it's not just a negative thing about getting harassment to stop, which is really, really important. It's also about creating a supportive environment, a positive environment. The third thing is that, and I talked about the individual already, but a member has to take absolute responsibility for their mental well-being. I want to be like Neil. It means I actually have to stop eating the foods that I want to eat, and apparently I have to work out. You run like a gazelle. Well, I'm never going to run like a gazelle. The seismic triggers go off whenever I try to plod around the community. But I have to work out. I have to take responsibility for my physical well-being. There's nobody else that can do that. There's no program, that will make me fit. There's only me. Well, the same is true for my mental well-being. There's no program that will make me well. I have to, of course I can take advantage of a program. I can use a program, but it's me that has to go, okay, I am hurt. What do I do now? Right? We all get it. Hopefully that when somebody does their ankle, they're not stupid enough just to really come in the next day and lace their boot up tight and try to pretend it didn't happen. People do that. I watch people do that. And it's really dumb. Like look after I want you to look after your ankle. I want you to go off sick. or WCB or whatever, because I want you to have a really good ankle 2 years from now. Because this is we're in a marathon here with our members, right? It's a long-term thing. It's not the next shift. It's 30 years of policing that we're going for. So the same thing, if a member goes to a SIDS death, it's just two members that get in the door and they listen to the mother's keening, and it rips their heart, because it should. I expect them to take a knee and get better and not lace up their boot and pretend it never happened. So if that means a little time off work, so be it. If it doesn't mean that, but they go see somebody or whatever it is, they have to take responsibility for it, and we need to support it, but they need to go and do it, because lacing up the boot after that and pretending you didn't get hurt is just going to start putting crap into a canister inside you that's going to blow up one day. You got to be cleaning out your canister. And the fourth thing is, and this is where I put this forth because a lot of organizations seem to think this is what you do and it's fun and then you're done. And so we need programs that will provide the support, intentional programs. So we need to teach resilience to our members. And there are techniques to be taught that the psychologist or other people, the psychologists I'm working with, are putting together a resiliency program, and lots of people have them. Like A Road to Mental Health Readiness was a one step towards 50 steps toward having that figured out, but it's a start. We need to have programs in our organization. There's programs for peer support that are really important. So an organization should have a peer support program where people reach out. Ideally, when you are going through whatever heck for because you're under a Police Act matter, ideally your friends rally around you, but not everybody has that kind of support. And other people might need to rally around you if you don't happen to have the right people who can do that for you. So peer support's huge. Reintegration programs. How you bring somebody back who's been hurt, even physically hurt, really, really matters to their mental well-being. Somebody's out of the workplace for 6 months. They actually are facing a bit of a crisis when they walk back in the door, even if it was for a broken leg. We need to get that, and we need to figure out how to support our people better through reintegration programs. So, for examples, those are examples, and every organization can figure out where they should go next around that. So there are tools, but it's not. You don't just strap a tool to the old way of doing things to the organization. And the other thing I'll say, and the Pierre Lemaitre inquest really speaks to this, is that our people are often broken in half by two things happening, if you will. And you described multiple things sometimes in people's lives, but there's the trauma of being on the street, and there's organizational stress, the way our organizations function. So back to me being a leader of an organization that places organizational stress on people when they want to compete for a job. They want to compete for sergeant. How we do that, how we run systems like that really, really matters to people. They need to be treated and feel like they've been treated fairly going through a process like that. It's stressful to compete for sergeant. Of course it is. But at the end, if you feel betrayed by the process or your organization, the amount of stress on you is just huge, right? And so that story illustrates how when those two things come together, it's more than somebody can take.
Absolutely. So you mentioned that after sort of the 17, after the two suicides, now we're working up towards Constable Davidson, but you had started working on sort of leaders learning a new way to lead.
Oh, yeah. So what did I do?
Yeah.
So I often describe my leadership style. This is a very complimentary thing to say about myself. I like to refer to it as flailing. And what I mean by flailing is I'll try anything and see what sticks. Like there's no starting one little program and evaluating it 6 months later. We dive into the deep end. And so we tried to do a lot of things to change our culture, change our organization after 2015. And so I tried to be different as a leader. We did bring psychologists in after those suicides. They helped me. We brought somebody in the very next morning after the first one and started talking about and getting advice about how to act. And this is the first time we did this, and I didn't think it was going to work. We brought a psychologist in, and they sat in an office, and people could make appointments and just walk down the hall and go and see them. And that goes against all the rules, that it needs to be private, and people, there has to be no connection to the organization. Well, there was a lineup outside the door. And so our members began to change how they viewed getting that kind of help. We began to develop a wellness program. So I believe in strategic planning. It's real simple. Where are you now? Figure that out. Figure out where you want to be, and then figure out significant steps that will move you towards where you want to be from where you are. And then stop a year later and go, okay, how far did we get? What are the next best steps to take? And just keep on going. So we developed a wellness plan. And in 2017, Abbotsford implemented 3 things. And this came from members that are interested in this, champions from the front line. I asked them, what of all the things we could do, what should we do next? And so in 2018, every member, when I say every member, I'm including all 300 of us, doesn't matter what your function is at work, hopefully we will manage to get virtually every person to see a psychologist by the end of this year. So you go for a checkup, and that's not an evaluation. That's not somebody phoning us and giving you an 8 out of 10 on your sanity score. This is you going and seeing a psychologist and talking about what you want to talk about, and working on your own checkup. We did an evaluation with a survey and a psychologist to evaluate exactly where we were. So we tried to put the needle on how much mental illness is affecting our members, because it's not mental health's not binary. It's not I'm sick, I'm well. You're somewhere on the needle. We're all somewhere on the needle. Road to Mental Health Readiness was right when it talked about green all the way over to red. And so you can have members with some level of PTSD doing incredibly well at work. Like one is not, we're all struggling with different things. And one of the things I talk about with mental wellness is pushing yourself to be in a place where you're excelling, where you're doing fantastic, as opposed to trying not to be sick and falling off the edge into the abyss of illness. It's about always trying to keep yourself even better than you can. And the third thing we're doing, we did a fitness challenge. So you wonder where I lost some of that weight. So 180 of us signed up, and we had a guy come in and do a pinch test. Now they had to use ice tongs for me.
I doubt that. Look at you.
Well, anyway, the idea was not just to focus on weight, but to focus on fat content, and to look at diet, and to look at different styles of exercise. And he held all kinds of, he and his wife, because we had a female trainer come in as well, meet with our people and give personal insights and diet insights and exercise plans and encouragement. And to challenge each other, and we had winners and losers, and we didn't have losers, but we had people win something at the end of the day if they were the ones that had the greatest change in their body fat muscle content, so because physical well-being is inextricably tied to mental well-being. We are not one and the other. We're not a mind sitting inside this physical body that there's no connection. You know what? Here's a typical example. Everybody talks about serotonin as a neurotransmitter you need to not be depressed. Well, serotonin's manufactured in your gut. Gut health will increase the levels of serotonin in your body. Perhaps not necessarily. You might have an issue genetically, and you need to take something to help you. But for a lot of people, gut health will mean higher levels of serotonin, and life feels better. So you got to work on all those things. So that's why we added that one in. And maybe that's why I'm a few pounds lighter.
Well, obviously it's working. That's right. The proof is in the pudding. So I want to come back to this question here, and I want you to sort of move forward to Constable Davidson, but I want you to sort of think about sort of the role your wife played, the role your family played, the role your faith played in relation to sort of how this all unfolds at the end. But move us forward to sort of, now you have the organization right-sided. I heard you, it's back on the water anyways.
Yeah.
And I've certainly heard you say that, suicide, it can be like a contagion,
yes.
So it can be contagious, and you've been able to sort of stop that and be able to hopefully move the organization forward with all the things that you've mentioned. But now you have another significant trauma event.
Yeah, we actually had two in a way, and because leading up to losing John, exactly a year before, not November 1st of 2016, we had the stabbing in
That's right.
Abbey High School.
Yes.
Which is different. It's outside the organization, but 65 members went to a school where a 13-year-old girl lost her life, and another girl was seriously hurt. And those are euphemistic words for what our members encountered when they went through the door. And I was there, and so we were all there, if you know what I mean. Anybody who could be at work that day, anybody who was in training, we were all there. That's how Abbotsford responded. That's all how Delta would respond, exactly. And so what was interesting, because first of all, to quickly say that the people in that school, the staff in that school, were unbelievable. They stopped mentally ill man from taking it much, much further. And we were there. We were through the door in 4 minutes, our first member. And so we would have been there quick and done what we had to do, but they had done an incredible job. And their trauma is unreal. And it was neat for me to meet the young girl who survived that recently, and her story about how she has faced her trauma is unreal. And I'm so proud of her. She's incredible. But the next day, I'm watching my members march down the hall to see the psychologist. The next day, our members are like, oh my gosh, that, once again, back to the expletives, effed me completely up. I am going to see somebody, even if it's not the guy down the hall. I'm headed out to see my guy or gal or person, whatever. The discussion in our building was a better one than we'd ever had before because of the sort of place that we'd been through and where we'd ended up, in my belief, that our culture had changed enough by 2016 that we understood that when you got hurt, you got help. And so a year later, and we're still working on stuff as we go through this. I've done a 10-part blog internally about trying to stay well and just trying to keep the discussion alive that way and doing different things like that. And so November 6, 2017 is when John Davidson was murdered. And what's incredible about that story is the part that other police departments played in Bend Don't Break, in Take a Knee. Because what you did, what the RCMP did, what Vancouver did, was let everybody at the Abbotsford Police Department take a knee. We couldn't have done that otherwise. You instinctively came in as colleagues and let everybody go down on one knee. And so our health through that, it obviously different members have gone through different, very difficult journeys trying to come through that and be well. But the organization's health, the vast majority of our members were so helped by the fact that 100 Vancouver police officers just started racing to Abbotsford after Adam phoned me. And I looked up, I'm at the scene, John is on the ground, one of my members is on his knees trying to save his life, more than one, but one just sticks out of my brain when I say that, I can see his face. And I look up and there's a member from Langley, a detective from Langley, already taking over part of that crime scene. And that's how quickly support was coming in. So we had hundreds of police officers come in that day and then support us through that. We replaced that shift for the entire week. We didn't let them come back to work at all. For all the members that were working that day, we replaced, in the 36 hours around the funeral, we replaced virtually every member. There's a couple of members we couldn't because we needed that interlink, if you will, to our jail system and all that stuff. But we were allowed to stop, take a knee. To me, this is a funny story. I'm doing a speech at John Davidson's service, and I'm choosing at the end of that to talk about taking a knee because I've got 8,000 first responders in front of me.
Nationally televised.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. It's a chance to talk about what where we're at, and just to talk about one aspect about taking a knee, and I say, if you need to take a knee, you should take a knee, to everybody in the audience. And two of my inspectors months later said to me, they looked up at me in horror because they're thinking, on Monday, nobody's coming to work. Because that's the tension. Yeah. That is their horror is absolutely understandable. Their job is to put a complete team on the street to keep the community safe. The chief can say all the goofy things he wants. They've got to actually make it happen on the street every day. Like, what if nobody came? There's an old story about a conductor standing in front of a very nervous young band, and he says to everyone, if you're really nervous, just don't play. And his baton came crashing down, and it was complete silence. So he convinced them all to take a knee, right? So that was and it didn't happen that way. Everybody showed up for work on Monday because we had been able to look after ourselves through that. I mean, when I say everybody, of course we had members that needed to take a month or a year off work to come through this. I don't mean everybody. So I also don't want to present that we figured that all out. There are stumbles in that story around specific members that got missed. We would love to be so much better, so much more systematic. I wish we had better systems in place. Things I thought were happening didn't happen in different specific stories as I've gone back and met with people. But there's 5 members who rammed the suspect's car and then shot him. And I've tried to maintain contact with those people because, again, that's when a chief should show up and talk to those people and hold them as they've gone through a really, really difficult journey. And success coming through trauma like that doesn't always mean staying in the biz. Success means being able to sleep at night. Success means being able to love your family. Success means being able to go on in whatever best place that is for you. Because sometimes what we do for a living is just too much.
So let me take you now sort of as we begin to sort of wrap up a little bit here. And I want to talk a little bit about you. And you skirted it around. Me. It is. So a little bit about your family, sort of your faith. What's helped you stay together?
Yeah. And I have a hard time answering this question because I feel well at this point. I don't have nightmares. I'm not saying I never have a dream or I never deal with this, but I sleep at night. I don't have PTSD. I'm affected by this job. We're all affected by this job. We all carry scars from this job. But I often like, why is that the case? Why don't I? One of the little blogs I wrote when I did that 10-part blog was on your lens, how you see the world. I used a picture of glasses. And so I have a very well-developed lens that comes from my faith. And so I'm a person who believes in following Jesus and sort of trying to be this that kind of a person. I hate using the Christian word because it's so religiously built up or whatever. So to me, it's about a relationship. It's about really, really simple, straightforward things about trying to, he said, would you mind doing 2 things, love God and love other people? I'm kind of like, okay, let's keep it simple here, folks. So that's what I believe. I believe what that leads me to try to be as a servant leader, somebody who is there to look after other people. So that's part of it. The lens I have, it says that there is good and evil in the world. And that actually is really, really helpful for a police officer to understand that there is pure evil and there can also be great good, that the two are out there together. And so when a young girl gets stabbed to death in a school, and some of my members are like, I have no framework for understanding how this is possible when they encountered it. I'm like, I do. I believe in pure evil. And evil isn't necessarily about just the person. It's about a belief that there is an evil force. And so I actually have a tattoo on my leg because my other son is a tattoo artist, amazing tattoo artist. And that tattoo is of a warrior down on one knee because in one of the books of the Bible, it says, look, the fight isn't against flesh and blood. It's against evil. And so put on the armor of God, like, because you're in the fight. And so the warrior on my knee, on his knee, represents somebody who is acknowledging that there is a fight. He's down on one knee because of who he serves, but he's got the armor on. And that's my image for myself a little bit. And I don't mean like I'm a tough guy, because look at me. I'm not allowed to say my first nickname. It's not politically correct, but this is the nickname they gave me back in 1980. I was the albino dwarf. So the idea of being physically intimidating is not part of how I police, right? But the idea of being in the fight when it comes to good and evil is my mindset. Mm-hmm. And so it's how I understand what's going on in front of me and the part I'm to play. And so I think if you think, okay, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, I can leave the rest to God. I can, I don't control everything here. But I'm in a place I'm supposed to be, and I'm trying to do what I think I'm trying to do, failing at times, obviously, making mistakes at times, but getting back up and trying to do what I think I'm supposed to do, I think that keeps you healthy. I think that's part of the reason that I'm okay. If I'm trying to, and that's me guessing why, you know, and I really think it's important to try to be self-aware. So when I say this, maybe I'm completely off base.
You're being
nuts.
thoughtful. Yeah.
I know. But you guys might, when I leave, you're going, wow, there's a cuckoo banana guy. so you're, you know, whether your self-awareness is dead on or not, one of the fundamental things I think a leader has to become is self-aware. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm healthy. I don't mean, like I say, it's not binary. I'm not without my issues, but I have been able to go through this, and I think that's some of it. And I think having my wife be this supportive person, and support is not slippers and a pipe at the end of the day. Support is probing hard questions about what's really going on. Because I probably started out as a cop as a pretty typical guy who didn't connect to his feelings super well, and that's not acceptable to my wife. There were lots of hard conversations where she probed about what I'm really feeling, and would push to get to and make me be uncomfortable understanding where I'm at. And it's funny, I was sat with those three psychologists, and I was ticked off about something significant that had happened at work. The three of them spend a half an hour making me name the emotion. But it's weird, because once you truly admit what you're really feeling, it's so much easier to deal with it, right? And really, that was part of my wife's great support has been that kind of uncompromising, no BS, what's really going on.
So what I've heard you say today is that you've had some learnings through your experience on both the organizational side and then sort of the personal toolkit side, and what you did to keep yourself and others healthy. I want to be able to sort of cover off what I heard, and then certainly please jump in at any time, and then I'll let you close off with anything else you want to be able to leave us with as a result of your tremendous leadership and learning that you've had over the last 4 or 5 years. So organizationally, you talked about the 4 things. Leaders need to lead in a new way. We need to be able to have a workplace that's safe. We need to make sure that members have absolute responsibility for their own mental health, and to their own extent, physical health as well. And finally, you know, the one that we always fall back on is there needs to be programs within the organization. Those are what you said the organization has to do. And that's great for leaders like me who want our workplaces to be well. And I think that's a really good outline. And then you talked about sort of things that helped you get through it. And the first thing you mentioned that I thought was very good was when you find yourself in a situation where you're facing trauma, recognize that from that trauma, you'll be in a better place to be able to help others. And that was kind of empowering, I thought. It just kind of gave power back to the trauma, saying that not only are you going to feel this, but you're going to have the ability now to be able to give someone else and share that experience with someone else and give them strength. So you can actually give by getting. Second thing, so I'll ask for your comments in a few seconds. The second thing you said is pay attention to your physical and medical cues, such as concussions, right? You know, pay attention to those things that you're seeing. And often we go by life and it's, hey, how you doing, man? Well, I'm good. How you doing today? And no one really cares, right, about what you're saying. But pay attention to those, certainly as a leader and as friends. The third thing is that you said there's 2 missions. There are 2 M's in mission. First one is, as a police officer, our job is to keep the community safe, but it's also to keep our members safe and creating an environment internally where they feel safe and they can openly express their feelings and be able to keep themselves mentally fit. But the last one, I think, is probably what you've done the best. And I've saved it for last because one of the things we often hear is around the stigma that's created around being able to see someone and being able to take a knee, bend, don't break, or being able to just ask for help. And I think that Abbotsford has done a very good job in being able to reduce the stigma within the organization, where you do have lineups outside that psychologist's office now, and people aren't afraid to be able to go get help. So I'll turn it over to you to sort of bring in this all to a close and leave us with any final thoughts.
So picture the day you put a badge in your pocket and what you wanted to do and who you are. And we go out there and we hire the very best people we can find. They're amazing people. Currently, were breaking between 4 and 5 of them in half at the end of their career if you add up PTSD, depression, anxiety disorders, burnout. That's wrong. We have got to change the story. And so when your members are listening to this, I want them to hear you are some of the special people in this world. There's lots of special people. I appreciate that, your kid's grade 1 teacher might be amazing, and the doctor who works in ER is wonderful too. But a police officer who goes out there to keep people safe, people they don't even know, an incredible member of this community who has put themselves forward and been trained, but selected because of who they are and what they're willing to do. You are worth keeping well. You are worth investing in yourself. You do not deserve to be broken in half. You are worth it. And so you need to grasp how important you are, how valuable you are, and the investment in keeping yourself well, even if that means your workplace has to be without you for a little bit of time at various points in your marathon of a career. Do it because you are valuable and you are worth it.
You nailed it. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. These productions never come without a lot of work from everyone involved. A big shout out and thank you to Constable Aaron Hill, Melissa Granum, and Nikki Hewitt for producing and recording, and of course post-production done by Podfly. Next week on Bend, Don't Break.
It went down to me being massively overweight, super unhealthy, why did this happen to me, that sort of thing. But the lessons I learned was from that one. So this time it wasn't going to be that way. I'm going to get out of hospital as fast as I can. I'm going to get healthy as fast as I can. I'm going to be in the gym. So I wasn't going to allow myself this time to kind of devolve down into that victim mentality.
For more episodes, you can find us on all major podcasting platforms like iTunes and Google Play. If you have a story to tell, let us know. Go to deltapolice.ca/podcast to submit your idea. And don't forget to connect with the Delta Police Department on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Once again, thanks for tuning in.